On Tuesday, July 17, 2007, at 6:54 p.m., TAM Linhas Aéreas Flight 3054 touched down at São Paulo-Congonhas Airport. It was a routine landing on a busy evening with 187 people on board. But the Airbus A320 didn't slow down. It didn't stop. Instead, it accelerated off the runway, across a busy avenue, and into a cargo building. How could a modern airliner simply refuse to stop on landing? The answer was far more complex and unexpected than anyone imagined. I'm Captain James Harlow, a retired airline captain with 28 years in commercial aviation. Welcome aboard. My career took me through countless landings, some in perfect conditions, others on challenging runways, but TAM Flight 3054 presents a mystery that still resonates through the industry. To understand what happened that Tuesday, you need to look at the people, the place, and the machine itself. This wasn't some remote airstrip. São Paulo-Congonhas Airport sits in the heart of one of the world's busiest cities. Its runway is notoriously short for a major hub, a real challenge in wet conditions. Locals called it the aircraft carrier because of its elevated position and the precision required for landings. The captain was Kleber Lima, 53 years old, a veteran of 25 years with TAM. He had over 15,000 flight hours, 8,000 of them on the Airbus A320. Lima had a calm demeanor, meticulous with every detail. He was married with 2 grown children and widely respected for his professionalism. His first officer was Henrique Stefanini, 30 years old, 7 years with TAM, and 3,000 flight hours total, 1,000 on the A320. Stefanini was bright and ambitious, dedicated to his craft. He was engaged to be married with a promising future ahead. These weren't rookies, they were experienced pilots, well-versed in their aircraft and their route. The aircraft, registered as PRMBK, was an Airbus A320-33, manufactured in 1998. It was 9 years old at the time, a seasoned workhorse. Think of it like a reliable family car that's been meticulously maintained but has serious mileage. This Airbus had flown about 20,000 hours, completing 9,300 takeoffs and landings. It was constantly in service, moving people across the country. 2 IAE V2527EA5 engines powered it, known for reliability and power. But it was the systems designed to stop the plane that would come under intense scrutiny. Among the 187 people on board were individuals with their own lives and stories. Doña Lucia Pereira, 70 years old, a retired schoolteacher, was returning home to São Paulo after visiting her sister. She wanted to see her beloved cat and spend time in her garden. Roberto Almeida, 42, a software engineer, was heading home after a week of business meetings. All he wanted was to see his 2 daughters and read them a story before bed. Beatriz Costa, 28, a flight attendant, was on the final leg of a 4-day rotation. She loved connecting with passengers and had plans for a quiet evening with friends. Each person on board had their own lives, their own loved ones waiting. They boarded Flight 3054 expecting a routine journey, like thousands of flights every day. Nobody saw this coming. Heavy rain had soaked São Paulo-Congonhas throughout the day. Runway 35 left was particularly treacherous. You have to understand, this runway, though recently resurfaced, lacked crucial safety grooves. These grooves are cut into asphalt to channel water away and prevent tires from riding on a water film, a phenomenon called hydroplaning. Without them, the runway became notoriously slippery in rain. Many pilots knew this. Captain Lima and First Officer Stefanini had been briefed on the wet conditions and the reduced braking action they could expect. As the Airbus made its final approach into São Paulo at 6:54 p.m., rain was still falling. Captain Lima guided the aircraft down, focused on the wet runway. First Officer Stefanini monitored their systems. They touched down. Immediately upon touchdown, Captain Lima called for reverse thrust, a standard procedure to help slow the aircraft. But only the right engine's thrust reverser deployed. The left engine's thrust lever stayed in the climb position instead of being pulled back to idle. This small detail had enormous consequences. The Airbus's FADEC system, its computer that manages engine performance, has a specific logic. If a thrust lever is in a forward position, the system assumes the pilot intends forward power. It will prevent the corresponding thrust reverser from activating. So the right engine applied reverse thrust while the left engine still produced significant forward thrust. At the same time, the aircraft's automatic braking system and the ground spoilers, panels on the wings that pop up to destroy lift and increase drag, failed to activate. Their logic was tied to the thrust lever positions. If an engine was in a forward thrust configuration, these deceleration systems wouldn't engage. It was a safety design meant to prevent a pilot from accidentally reversing while the aircraft was configured for forward flight. In this scenario, it became a fatal flaw. Instead of powerful deceleration, the aircraft was being pushed forward by the left engine, while the right engine tried to slow it down. On the flight deck, Captain Lima and First Officer Stefanini immediately sensed something was wrong. They'd landed thousands of times, and this wasn't the feel of an aircraft slowing. They felt acceleration. Captain Lima called out, "Reverse, reverse!" while First Officer Stefanini confirmed, "Speed brakes no, reverse not engaged." Both were pushing hard on the rudder pedals, which control the wheel brakes. But with the left engine still generating forward thrust and the runway slick with water, manual braking was severely compromised. The Airbus veered sharply to the left, pulled by the asymmetrical thrust. The condition of runway 35 left was a subject of intense controversy for weeks before this accident. Pilots, including some from TAM, had voiced serious concerns about the runway's slipperiness in wet conditions. The recent resurfacing had made it smoother, but the critical safety grooves had not been cut in. Pilots described it as a skating rink during heavy rain. Official advisories warned of reduced braking action. The surface, designed to bring aircraft to a halt, was known to be inadequate for the weather. This wasn't a sudden problem. It was a known risk that had been allowed to persist. Back in the cockpit, Captain Lima pulled both thrust levers all the way back, trying to force full reverse, but the FADEC logic for the left engine remained locked out. The aircraft was hurtling down the runway, well past the point where it should have been decelerating. Inside the cabin, passengers felt the plane speeding up instead of slowing. Alarms blared in the cockpit. "Runway end! Runway end!" they screamed. Captain Lima and First Officer Stefanini continued pushing on the brake pedals, using every ounce of their training and experience. They were fighting an impossible battle. The end of the runway approached fast. They were still moving at an unsustainable speed. The Airbus breached the end of runway 35 left at an estimated 103 knots, roughly 119 miles per hour. It plunged down an embankment, tearing through a perimeter fence. The massive aircraft crossed Avenida Washington Luis, a major four-lane avenue, at high speed, narrowly missing cars whose drivers swerved frantically. The Airbus slammed into a TAM Express cargo building and an adjacent gas station. A catastrophic explosion erupted, engulfing the wreckage in fire. Silence followed. Moments before, 187 lives had been on board. Now there was only fire and smoke. The aircraft hit the embankment at 103 knots. Metal screamed as it tore through the perimeter fence and ripped into the ground. In the cockpit, Captain Lima and First Officer Stefanini braced against the controls, bodies tensed. The nose dipped sharply, then slammed into the earth, a bone-jarring shockwave rocketing through the entire airframe. The world became a blur of concrete and steel, a violent, uncontrolled slide. A deafening crunch erupted as the wings sheared away, the fuselage beginning its collapse. Fire erupted instantly, a blinding flash filling every window. The cabin buckled, the floor ripping open. Oxygen masks, overhead bins, personal belongings, everything tore free, flying forward with lethal force. Passengers were flung violently against their restraints, absorbing unimaginable G-forces. Searing heat consumed everything. There was the acrid smell of jet fuel, burning plastic, and dense smoke. The sounds of tearing metal mixed with the roar of the explosion. 187 lives ended in an instant, trapped in fire and twisted metal. The towering column of black smoke rose into the night sky, visible for miles across São Paulo. Within minutes, emergency vehicles raced toward the scene, sirens wailing. Firefighters from multiple brigades converged on the burning cargo building and aircraft remains. battling an inferno that threatened to spread to nearby structures. Ambulances staged nearby, but the reality was grim. There would be no survivors from the aircraft. The devastation was immense. Police secured a wide perimeter, pushing back growing crowds of onlookers and media. As news spread, families of those on board began arriving at the airport, their faces showing desperate hope that would soon be crushed. The airport became a scene of profound grief and confusion. Within hours, accident investigators from CENIPA, Brazil's Aeronautical Accidents Investigation and Prevention Center, were on their way, beginning the long process of understanding how this tragedy occurred. They faced a scene of utter destruction scattered across a city street. The investigation into TAM Flight 3054 revealed a confluence of factors, each critical to the outcome. It wasn't one catastrophic event, but a chain where each link contributed. First, the most immediate factor was the thrust lever configuration upon touchdown. The flight crew inadvertently left the left engine's thrust lever in a forward thrust position, the climb detent, while the right engine's thrust lever was correctly moved to reverse. The Airbus A320's FADEC system has built-in safety logic. If any engine is commanded to produce forward thrust, the system prevents the deployment of ground spoilers and the engagement of auto brakes. It also prevents the thrust reverser for that specific engine from deploying. This design prevents accidental deceleration when the pilot intends forward motion. In this landing scenario, it meant only the right engine provided reverse thrust, while the left engine actively pushed the aircraft forward. The ground spoilers remained stowed, and the automatic braking system did not engage. The aircraft lost 3 vital braking components because of one thrust lever's position, interpreted by FADEC as a command for forward flight. This wasn't a malicious system failure. It was a safety design intended for one purpose that became fatal in an unforeseen context. Second, the condition of runway 35 left played a devastating role. This runway was known to be notoriously slippery in wet conditions. The recent resurfacing made it smoother, but critically, the necessary safety grooves had not been cut in. These grooves channel water away from the tire contact patch, preventing hydroplaning and maintaining friction for braking. Without them, the runway became, as pilots described it, a skating rink in the rain. This was a known, documented issue, with pilots voicing concerns and official advisories warning of reduced braking action. The failure was systemic. Airport authorities and regulatory bodies allowed a critical safety deficiency to persist despite clear warnings. Even if all the aircraft's deceleration systems had worked perfectly, the runway's compromised surface would have significantly reduced their effectiveness. This demonstrates that advanced aircraft are fundamentally reliant on the integrity of their operating environment. Third, the asymmetrical thrust and the pilot's inability to brake created an impossible situation. With the right engine in reverse and the left engine pushing forward, the Airbus was subjected to immense and unbalanced forces. This caused the aircraft to veer sharply to the left, making directional control challenging. The pilots, despite their extensive experience and immediate response, found their manual braking efforts severely compromised. They were pushing on the rudder pedals, which control wheel brakes, but without ground spoilers to destroy lift, and with one engine still providing forward thrust on a slick runway, their actions were insufficient. They were fighting against the aircraft's own systems and a compromised runway. This highlights the limits of human intervention when critical automated systems aren't engaging as expected, and the physical environment is fundamentally compromised. It became an unwinnable battle against physics. The investigation confirmed the complex interplay of human action, aircraft system logic, and environmental factors. It was definitively established that the left engine's thrust lever was inadvertently left in the forward climb position upon touchdown, while the right engine was correctly set to reverse. This detail, interpreted by the FADEC system as a command for forward thrust, prevented ground spoiler activation and auto brake engagement, and locked out the left engine's thrust reverser. The inquiry also highlighted the critical danger of runway 35 left, whose lack of safety grooves made it unsafe in wet conditions, a known hazard inadequately addressed. This accident forced a global reevaluation of operational safety. As a direct result, new procedures were implemented worldwide for the Airbus A320 fleet. In April 2008, The European Union Aviation Safety Agency issued Airworthiness Directive 2008-0062. This mandated revised flight crew operating manual procedures, requiring pilots to ensure both engine thrust levers are brought to idle detent, even if one thrust reverser is deactivated, to guarantee proper deployment of ground spoilers and auto brakes. This fundamental clarification in operating procedures, along with increased scrutiny of runway surface conditions and grooving standards globally, has undoubtedly prevented similar accidents. We can only estimate, but the lessons learned here have certainly saved countless lives, sparing families from such loss. For the 187 people on board Flight 3054 and the 12 more on the ground, their memory serves as a constant reminder of aviation's pursuit of safety. This accident raises a complex question. The Airbus FADEC system was intended to prevent accidental forward thrust during landing. But here, its safety logic meant crucial braking systems didn't engage, even with pilots trying to stop. What's your perspective? Do you think the aircraft's design, which prioritized preventing a forward thrust error over ensuring all braking systems deploy, was a necessary safety measure? Or did it create a fatal trap for Captain Lima and First Officer Stefanini that day? If you found this story compelling and want to keep exploring these moments in aviation history, please hit the like button. It's a small click and completely free, but it truly helps this independent channel reach more people interested in understanding these crucial lessons. And if you haven't already, subscribe and consider becoming a member. Your direct support allows me to dedicate the time and resources needed to research these complex events thoroughly. I'm just one retired pilot trying to share what I've learned, and your engagement makes all the difference. I'll be in the comment section, as always, reading your thoughts on the FADEC system and the crew's predicament. Let's keep the conversation respectful and insightful. Thank you for joining me.